oh golly, year and a half or 2 years since we were down here the last time. It's always a joy and a pleasure to be with you. At that time, a year and a half ago or two, whatever it was, I still had my shoulder harness on, as I recall. I'd had a bad fall. As you can imagine what I was doing, I was hanging Carnival glass on a 6-foot ladder, a tippy 6-foot ladder, and I fell and took about $30,000 worth of Carnival with me. 8-row show, poppy shows, and punch sets, and the two pieces that were the rarest that I hated badly to lose were the two wisteria water pitchers, an ice blue and white, and those are getting, you know, almost impossible to find. Now my shoulders are just fine, no problem whatsoever, but everything else has gone to hell. So I still apparently am not out of the woods as yet. Now I suspect that some of you came to this meeting just so you wouldn't have to watch the Rams football team. We're kind of sorry the way your team is going, and we're sorry the 49ers beat up on you last time if they were up there. So I extend my sympathies to you. I also want to tell you a little incident that happened when they played the 49ers a while back. The 49ers got into a squabble on the field because of the strike. Some of them had crossed the picket line and so on. And all of them walked off of the field. Well, you know, 3 plays later, the Rams scored. I thought that was an accomplishment. Now, also, before I go any further, I think I should say a few words about my friend Al Schubert here. Al marches to a little different drummer than some of us, and I think you'd have to know a little of his background to understand him. When he was a kid and played hide and go seek, the other kids wouldn't look for him. And that left kind of a bad impression on him, I think. He'd come home from school and find that his parents had moved. That's disconcerting for a kid, you know, to have that happen to him. He tells me that his parents were so poor when he was a boy that they would get him dead pets. And he said he'd have to tie the little hamster on the exercise wheel, you know. And each night he'd come home and take the dog for a drag. And things like that, you know, left an impression. When these folks were able to buy him a real pet, they bought him a zebra. They saw in the paper where a little zebra was for sale. And what do you think Al named him? Named him Spot. That again, I think, will give you some idea of Al Schubert. He's been ill the last week or two, and his fellow employees sent him a get well card. It was a close vote, 14-12, whether or not to send it, but they did carry, and they did send it. He's had these headaches, which have bothered him, and Kay for years has said, when you get up in the morning, Al, it's feet first. I've never quite been able to figure that out. Okay, Al, I think I've roasted you enough. All of that is preliminary to saying that without Al and Kay and Rusty, these programs would be impossible, because they do all the heavy work of unloading the car and helping me lug this stuff around and unpack and so on. So we are very grateful to them. And even Rusty's fine friend Richard got in the act this morning, so we thank you too, Richard. Okay, let's start over here and talk a little bit about Carnival glass. First of all, before we look at the specific pieces, let's think a little bit about red in general. Red, of course, is one of the rarest colors in Carnival, and it's rare because not too much of it was made. It's an extremely difficult color to make, and the old Butler catalogs will bear out the fact that it was even more expensive when they were making it than the other color. Nearly all of the red that you will see here, and nearly all of the red that was produced, was made by Fenton. The only exception will be a few pieces of Imperial that you will see here. Now, there has never been any proven Northwood in red, Millersburg in red, Cambridge in red, U.S. Glass. None of those companies made any red as far as we've been able to establish to date. Fenton made nearly all of their standard patterns in red. When you see the dragon and lotus and the stag and holly and two flowers and peacock and grape and so on, nearly all of those standard patterns were produced in red. But none of their more rare specialty patterns, now the Peter Rabbit and little fishes and patterns like that, were never produced in red so far as I know. Northwood probably didn't make any red because red came later in the period after Northwood was out of business. Harry Northwood died, I think it was 1921, and the company closed the year following. Red probably was made starting in 23, 24, and 5 and on into that period. So that is one reason why you don't see any Northwood red. They were out of business probably before red, the formulas and so on became known. You will never see, as far as I have been able to observe, any pie crust edge in a red label. And the reason being that pie crust edge is an exclusive edge of the Northwood glass company. You'll never see another piece, to my knowledge, with a pie crust edge excepting the Northwood pattern. So no red pie crust edge pieces. You've heard stories, of course, about red water pitchers, red punch sets, and so on. Not so. I've never seen a red water set or a red punch set in a Carnival. Now, to be sure, a few cups and one vase have turned up in fashion, old-fashioned in red. But that's the only parts of a water set or punch set that I've ever heard of. And no top has ever been found in the fashion red pattern. I've always wondered why they didn't make kittens. Kittens would have been, which is one of those popular patterns, and they made lots of kittens. But I've never seen or heard of a red kittens piece. And that's by way of leading into one of my favorite stories that I heard recently about this, and the kittens lovers will like it. This little kitty cat died and went to heaven. And St. Peter said, "Now you have been such a nice little kitty cat on earth that we'd like to do something special for you." He said, "What would it be?" And the kitty cat said, "I've always wanted a pillow of my own." St. Peter said, "No problem, here it is." Well, next to heaven were two little mice that had died. And St. Peter went through the same routine. He said, "You've been awfully good little mice. What can we do for you?" He said, "We've always wanted roller skates while we're on earth. We just think that would be so much fun." He said, "No problem, here's your roller skates." Well, a few weeks later, St. Peter bumped into the little kitty cat and said, "How do you like it up here?" "Well, just great." He said, "That pillow you gave me is just working out swell. I love it." He said, "And that Meals on Wheels thing of yours." But no red kittens that I've ever heard of or seen. Red, one of the principal ingredients of red is selenium. Now, I'm not a chemist and I don't know all the things that go into it, but selenium is one of the major things that go into making Carnival. And see if you can follow me now when I explain why some of these pieces are like they are. This is a little flowers piece, which you will see turns red. Can you see that when I hold it up, or can you see it better over here maybe? You will see it turns very red on the outside, but is amberini on the inside. Now, a lot of people refer to pieces like this as red gone bad. That isn't so. This was a designed color. It was designed to be this color, and I've seen 3 or 4 just exactly identical like that. So we know it wasn't an accident. It was made this way. And what happens is, by the red being only on the outside, when this glob of glass is dropped into the mold, it is more of this color that you see here in the base. When it comes from the mold, it still is that color. It is then a clamp goes on here, and it's refired. It's put back in the glory hole. The pieces that are thinner are the ones that turn color quicker than the interior. It takes it longer to heat up. So that's why the outside is red. It's a bit like when you're baking cookies. They'll brown on the outside. They get more heat and they're thinner on the outside and so on. So that is what makes up this type of color. You'll see this very predominantly so on this particular mud, where it is very amberine in the bottom and a very fine red on the outer edges. This is the orange tree mud with the amberina on the base. So don't think that just because you see a piece with amberina in there that kills it as a desirable piece. Now, to be sure, most people prefer cherry red. So your red pieces will bring a little bit more than your pieces with the amberina in them. But even some of your very, very gorgeous, expensive, and rare pieces of red will still have a little bit of amberina in the center. So don't let that throw you or deter you from buying a piece, because a lot of your major pieces in this handsome dragon and lotus here probably has a little. See a little amberine in the middle? Maybe even you could say it enhances the appearance of the piece. I think so. But again, most collectors would prefer to see it red. Let's talk about this piece for a minute. This is Fenton's red stretch orange bowl. Now, some of you newer collectors will wonder, well, is this Carnival? Well, it's all in how you approach it and what your definition of Carnival glass is. I prefer to think of stretch glass in a bit of a separate category, because I have always defined Carnival glass as pressed, iridescent pattern glass made in the United States between 1970 and 1932. If you want to drop out the word pattern, because this is unpatterned, then you would include your Carnival, your stretch, excuse me. And the stretch for your newer collector always has the stretch or onion skin appearance on the outer edges. Again, brought about by the more intense heat on the outside of the pieces where it cools, where it heats up a little bit faster. So I think of stretch as a bit of a category all its own, and that, in my opinion, doesn't downgrade it in any sense of the word. I think some stretch pieces are handsome, or I wouldn't have them in my collection. And in fact, this might be a good place to just look at the punch set. Again, this is a Fenton pattern, and again, the stretchy edge. Most of these have been put together. I know of 4 in our area there, and all of them were found separately, the bowl and the base. For some reason or other, you seldom see the two together. I intended to also tell you a few prices as we go along. And red moves so fast that unless you've seen the last auction report, you can be off a mile. So some of my prices may not be current, and some of them are pieces that haven't sold too frequently. So a lot of these will be an educated guess rather than factual. The punch bowl and base there, and incidentally, no red stretch cups have ever turned up except one. The Bookers in Indiana or somewhere in the Midwest have one red stretch iridized cup. It's the only cup I've ever seen. The red bowl and base was advertised very recently, in fact last week I think. Tom Mordini had one for sale for $1,200 in the Heart of America publication. This red orange bowl, and these when I say orange bowl, these were actually designed for oranges. Just like your banana bowls were really designed, as you know, for bananas, a bunch of bananas to go in there. So that's true with the orange bowls. This one would probably sell in the $300 to $350 category. These are Fenton's red stretch candlesticks, often referred to pattern-wise as Florentine, which is a Fenton name. These will, not in red, but in other colors, will come in varying sizes. This is the only size I've ever seen in red. They're always this large, which is a large Florentine size. Down here on the other end, and value-wise, $350, $400. Down here on the other end are exactly the same thing, but they have put a little gold leaf around the bottom, as you'll see here. Decorated a little bit around the bottom. Same thing exactly, except for that. Hard to come by. You don't see them very often anymore. Next, we have here a leaf chain little plate with lots of amberina in the middle. A bowl, did I say plate? Excuse me. I have never seen a leaf chain bowl, and incidentally, this is the only size that it ever comes in red. I've never seen one without an ample amount of amberina in the center. They're nearly all made this way, perhaps by design. Gosh, I haven't seen one of these sell for a while. I expect it would run in the $4.55, $5.50 range, something like that. Red is high. Red orange tree bowl. For you newer collectors, and this is what we refer to as an ice cream shape. Anything that is round, not ruffled, like this is a ruffled bowl, we refer to as ice cream shape, even though they were never designed as an ice cream bowl or an ice cream set. One of these, in fact, twice, this bowl has sold for $1,900. Both of them were ice cream bowl shape. Most people feel that ice cream bowl shape is a little more desirable than the ruffled shape. Displays the pattern a little better, and I think most people would, they had their choice, take it over the ruffled bowl. This is a little sailboat piece, which is nearly always amberina. Now there may be now and then one of these that is found in a good cherry red. I have never seen it. It's nearly always this type of red. Still brings a good price in the $400 range, give or take a few dollars either way. This is one of the last pieces, I guess, that we bought, in red at least. This is Imperial's stippled rays. It's shaped a little differently than I've seen it. Usually it's round, and it is a part of a two-piece set, creamer, and this was the sugar. But this has been pushed in a little bit. I bought this at the international convention this year, just a few months ago. I paid $425 for it. Even though stippled rays is a common pattern, in this shape it is quite desirable. I had never seen one before. You may remember me telling you, when we get a new piece of glass, we always say to our neighbor next door, who I'm sure we bore to tears. The Carnival collectors, you know, bore a lot of people that are into glass. And I said when I brought that home fairly recently, I said, Charles, did I tell you about the new piece of glass that I just bought? He said, no, and by God, I appreciate it. Fenton's Vintage. Now this is a good cherry red. This came back from England. I bought this from a friend who was over there on a trip, and he brought this back for me. Probably in the 800 to 1,000 category now. Very rare, even though a common pattern in red, quite rare. That, of course, is the ruffled bowl rather than the ice cream bowl shape. Usually this tends to be amberina. This one, however, is unusually good red. Oftentimes your red will have such heavy iridescent spray on it that it sort of kills the red. Now it's still just as red as if it didn't have the heavier spray on there, but again, most people prefer to look across the room and say that's red, rather than a piece that is so dark that you have to hold it up to the light to see. Cherry circles.
How much they want to know?
Oh, in the $3.50 range, 3 to 4 in that range. Cherry circles. Helen, you have one of the prettiest cherry circles I've ever seen. Gorgeous. Yeah, I know you've never been shy about that. And it is. It's very, very pretty. This one is no slouch, but it doesn't compare with hers. This piece has sold up to, you'll have to check me, I think one brought 1,900, didn't it, Ellen? 18 or 19?
1700.
17 was it? Was in that?
1700, that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, and that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, in parts of America.
Yes, so they are a
And
very,
it had a little chip off one of the
Did
little
it?
flowers.
Yeah. about a $400 chip, I expect. On it.
About a $400 chip.
Yeah. But again, a Fenton pattern, of course, and that is one of the larger bonbons that you will see. Now, you don't see any of the other cherry chain or cherry circle pieces, as far as I know, in red. It's just the bonbon. It's the only piece I have ever seen. This piece back here is probably the rarest piece that we brought with us. And this is the red ribbon tie. There's only 2 of these, and we bought this many years ago at an auction, Woody auction, where a fellow from Canada, his name was Laguerre, was selling his red collection, and he had a ton of it at one of the convention auctions. I think we paid $1,800, something like that, for it. A second one, at that time it was the only one known. A second one turned up, our dear friend Bob Pemberton, who's now deceased, and also his wife is deceased, bought it. We bought their collection after they both had passed on, and I sold it to Dale Matheny, who now owns it, for $3,000. And that's been several years ago. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, and if this went onto the open market, being only the 2, that it would bring in the $5,000 range. I know Noreen Campbell would almost kill to get her hands on one of these. Dale and Connie own controlling the market on red plaids, red comets, hold meetings ever so often, just like OPEC to set oil prices. I think they've got their price up to 8,000 or 9,000 at this point, at least. It is rare.
And beautiful.
There's only two of those that are known. This is another version, and it's also an excellent piece of red. And one of the very few red pieces I have ever seen with the ribbon candy edge. Now that gets its name, the ribbon candy edge, from the old hard Christmas candy, you know, that you'll see with that in that shape. But I can't recall seeing another piece of red with the ribbon candy edge, but quite rare, and it does, I think, add quite a little bit to the bowl. I expect if you had your choice, most of you would take this. At least I would, knowing how much more rare it is probably than this. Price-wise, at least $1,000. I'm not hitting my hangers too well. At least $1,000, I would say, with that edge on it. That again was in Bob Pemberton's collection when I bought it. He had bought it from Charles Perry in Mississippi some years before. One of the more common vases that you will ever see is rustic. However, in red, extremely rare. This is one of 2 that I know of. We've had this one for many years. We bought it from Ruth Dunnigan in Las Vegas. How I ever had time to hunt up a little carnival while I was in Las Vegas, I don't know. But we did, and we bought this many years ago. I since owned the only other one ever known. So there's 2 of those that turned up, and we sold it for $1,200. So a common pattern in a rare color. This also is a rare red piece. I don't know how good a red it is. A little bit. You'll see the streaks in there. Someone brought me a piece and asked if it was slag. It really isn't. Slag is much more opaque and is intended to be slag. Most of these pieces that you see with a few stripes in it is, in my opinion, a lousy job of someone making the mixture so that it's streaked a little bit on it.
What's the pattern?
Lotus and
I
gray.
can't see that.
I haven't ever seen one flatten out on both ends like this. We sometimes refer to this as a card tray bonbon, where it is open on both ends. I would suppose that this would now sell for in the $800 range, in that 7 to 9 at least, in that range. This is one of the more common vases in red, the Fenton Fine Red. The thing that makes this distinctive is the fact it's from a different mold than your standard one that you see. It's a little bigger base, and it's substantially taller. So I haven't ever seen another one this tall, this size, in red. Value-wise, I hadn't thought about it. The standard ones will bring 2, 2 1/4. I suppose this would bring 3, 3 1/2, maybe even 4 by being unusually tall. This one here is a weirdo. You folks see over here. Very, very unusual. And the feet are quite red on it. This has been one of those pieces that we've all chased for years, the big stag and holly bowl. It's always supposed to have been out there in red, but no one has ever come up with one really. This is the closest that I've seen to even verging on the red. Now when we get into the other side stag and holly, I'll show you that it is, of course, a red, well, I'll do it now, in fact. This is the spatula-footed stag and holly. And it comes it's still rare, but it is found fairly frequently. But this has never turned up in a solid red as yet, at least. It looks like they took a pass at it with this one here, but they didn't quite pull it off. It's rare. It should be. I hope it is. I paid $1,500 for that darn thing. It had been written up at some length in the Heart of America. You may have seen it years ago. And it is an oddity. So not the prettiest piece in the world, but rare. And the closest to red that I have seen in the large size. At that point, let me elaborate a little bit on two patterns which you've heard me expound on before. The stag and holly and the two flowers. Now over here is the two flowers in the same size and shape bowl. Nearly everything that is made in stag and holly is also made in two flowers, excepting the big red. And this is one of only two. See, it is an excellent red, but it does have a heavy iridescence on it. This is one of two. The other one was owned by Mr. Henry in Michigan, and it came up to auction in an auction earlier this year. Noreen Campbell bought it, paid $2,700 for it. I had bought this many years before at the Roebuck auction. I paid $900 for it, which was back then a hell of a price to pay for this particular piece. I always thought it was kind of homely, and had it on a bottom shelf where I couldn't see it too well until Noreen paid $2,700, and I sure moved this sucker up for you. Get a good look at it.
Is that 10 inch, Don?
Pardon?
Is that 10 inch?
Yes, this is a 10 inch, yeah. This is a 10 inch ball foot. Now, here is the running mate. You remember I told you everything that was made in two flowers was also made in stag and holly. This is the running mate of the stag and holly in red, the spatula footed. So, two flower, the big ball footed, and the spatula footed. Stag and holly, only the spatula footed, and the attempt at red that you see there. This stag and holly, $1,500. This much the same, $1,400 to $1,500 for the red two flower. Hard to come by both of those pieces. I've often thought, wouldn't it be something to find a little stag and holly in red, a little small? That would really be a little gem, but of course none has ever turned up. It has turned up in the panther, and it oftentimes will be in more the amberina, or we sometimes refer to it as brick red. However, this is an exception, and this is a good red panther, one of the better ones that I have seen. I've had a number of these, and I sold two in our auction earlier this year. One brought $500 and one brought $600. So, and they weren't nearly as good as this one. So it's always been a desirable little piece of glass. I'll always pay a
What's
big
the
price
pattern,
for it.
Don? I can't see the pattern. Panther.
Panther, yes. This little piece here, probably made from the same bottom portion of the mold as this one here. No, I shouldn't say that, because this one has canceled what I was about to say. But there are a number of pieces like this where they used the bottom portion of the mold with just a different pattern plunger coming down in. Again, for you newer collectors, the molds are the expensive part of Carnival. They cost thousands of dollars. The standard mold to make our souvenirs anymore for the clubs will run close to $10,000. So if they could use a part of that mold for a different pattern, why, they would always do so. And so they would very often use the bottom portion of the mold, which incidentally is where you get your 3 mold on most of your Carnival glass, so that it falls away from your piece. They would then use the pattern plunger, which is one piece, for the interior. This is called water lily or lotus and poinsettia, some people refer to it as. Price-wise, this little piece would sell for a bit less than the Panther, probably in the $4.55, in that range. But you see, by using the plunger on the inside, which is one piece, then you don't see the mold marks as you would if it was on the inside. And they're very clever in running it up the feet and so on, so that it's hidden. But when these come from the mold, they're quite sloppy. They'll be oozing out from the mold and so on, so they aren't nearly as perfect as you see here. And they have to fire polish them to smooth them out, knock some of the roughness off, the mold marks and so on. I told you the price on that. All right, we have 2 goblets here. These are Fenton. I suspect these could have had a lid. I don't know. I've seen some very similar ones in other colors that do have lids. I have never seen one of these with a lid, but I've always wondered if maybe they did have. No great big buck, but probably 200, I expect, on today's market for those. One of the more standard patterns in Carnival that we talked about a while ago is the dragon and lotus. Here are 2 different versions of it. And Virginia came walking in with a beautiful one a minute ago, which was equally as good as these. And these will have a little lambrine in the center, you see. I expect this one does too. But this one has a different treatment in the iridescence. It had a little darker spray than this one. This one had a clear, more clear spray, which let the red show through maybe even a little better than this one. But both of them equally desirable. If I had my pick, I don't know which I would take. Probably the darker one, because you don't see it quite so often. I probably mixed them up, that's why they don't fit so well.
What's the value on this one?
Boy, these Dragon and Lotus, 2 or 3 years ago, one at an auction brought $1,500. Now that was a bit of a fluke, and I don't think that is a true price. Oftentimes, your auction prices will get a bit out of hand. And I think it did in that case, because they haven't sold for that much since then. But I would think in the $1,000 range, give or take 100 either way, would pretty much catch a Dragon and Lotus. A good one on today's market. This is one of the better pieces of red holly that I have seen. We bought that from Tom Burns years ago. He had it in a room at an auction or a convention somewhere. And for you newer collectors, this is what we call a banana boat shape. Like the ice cream bowl shapes, we have also proselyted the term banana boat shape to anything that turns up on 2 sides. So we call this a hat from a hat shape, but in the banana boat shape, turned up on 2 sides. I think we paid, because it was such a good red, I think we paid $250 for it a good many years ago. Did we pay more than that? I expect today it would bring 3 or 4. Kind of shaking her head. She's always been higher. Thank God you people that are buying glass are buying my prices. She's very high back there. So if you don't like her price, come to me, because she marks some of it.
That's not what she said.
This is the lacy edge. We refer to that as lacy edge. Again, Fenton. These are all Fenton. I don't repeat it all the time unless I tell you otherwise. Again, in the banana boat shape, in the blackberry. Now, some of these will have blackberry, some of your lacy edge, and some will be plain on the inside. The blackberry is a bit larger than your normal. Oh, in fact, I brought one here. It is smaller, you see, and it has no blackberry on the inside. And this one is substantially bigger, as you'll see on the base. This is what we refer to as jack in the pulpit shape. Up in the front, down, up in the back, down in the front. So these pieces are always shaped very differently. And seldom will you see two of the lacy edge baskets shaped exactly the same. They really let their imagination run away with when they were shaping those. These are little holly sherbets, and they're quite rare. It also comes in a, what do we call it, the round
Goblet.
goblet. Sherbet, I guess we call it, sherbet shape.
size,
In fact, I have one on the table back there for sale. You'll see these more often than you will the sherbet shape. Nearly always your stem is pretty yellow, because they would hold it in the fire in this fashion, and the heat would be concentrated on the outer edge, which would turn that red, and they never made any attempt to hold it long enough or switch it around so that the stem got red. I'm sure they didn't think that we were going to be talking much about.
How much?
They have sold around 500.
That much?
Yes. Tom Burns got 500 twice in auctions. So they're a rare and desirable piece.
What did you call that shape, please, Don?
Compote shape. Was I calling it sherbet? Seems like I was. I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have been. It's compote shape. The other one is sherbet shape.
You didn't say how much that lacy basket.
Oh, I would say 350.
For the large.
Yeah, for the large. 350, maybe even 4, Helen, for a good one, but in that range. We've talked about everything but the lamp. Some of you haven't seen the peacock lamp, so I'm glad we brought it. We hadn't intended to, but our friend Dale Matheny said, oh, you must take the lamp. So we thought it was a good idea, and I'm glad we did. The only problem is the shade that we had on it was a little soiled, so we decided it had to go under a new shade. And my God, those things, huh?
It was a terrible.
Well, it was, I would have bought it, but she wouldn't have. But it cost us $75 to buy the damn shades. And all shades are about that. Yeah, I know it. You could have bought a nice piece of glass for that. This is the second peacock lamp we've had. The other one was purple. We sold it when we found this one in red. This one came with the fixtures pretty beat up. They weren't original. They were beat up, the base and the fixture up here, so we had it redone and a new base and the fixture put on it. I understand that the original lamp came with a pierced metal shade on it. I've only seen one that I thought was original, and a fellow named Mr. Brannan had it, and it was gorgeous too. Some of them had the little, what do you call the little glass things that hang around. His did. His had that on it. They're quite handsome. Now I'm going to shock all of you, and those of you who don't know, and tell you that that is one piece that you can make any color you want to. This piece is clear glass that has been iridized. So the iridescent spray, clear spray, is sprayed on the clear glass. It gets all of its color from paint on the inside. So if you wanted to scrape all of that red out of there, but nothing, you'd have a clear peacock Carnival lamp. It would be Carnival, pressed, it's iridized, meets all the qualifications. It wouldn't have any color. So if you wanted to make it purple, paint it with purple. If you have the nerve and the patience to get down in there and clean that out and paint it, or whatever color you wanted to make it, red, green. I've never seen a green one, but you could if you wanted to. So it isn't red glass. It's clear glass. Iridized clear glass painted on the inside.
Well,
Yeah.
do any of them come in a regular color except for clear and painted on the inside? Were some of them a pickle jar or something, then they made lamps?
Yes, I have seen these, not in Carnival, but they tell me that they have been found in Carnival that didn't have a hole bored in the bottom for lamps. And we have seen clear ones that way. They weren't iridized, they were just clear glass without any hole. On these, they were designed, your peacock lamps as such, with the hole obviously done at the factory because you can see the tool marks and even some iridization, as I recall, around that hole. I guess that, I don't know when these were made, but if Carnival was made in the later part of the Carnival period, not all of us would have had electricity even back then. I know we sure as heck didn't on the farm in Iowa there. We were still carrying the lantern and using the old Aladdin lamps and so on. So we wouldn't have had any way to use this had it been electrified. But it does, I understand, come that way in Carnival too, even though I haven't seen it. Value-wise, not as much as you might think. It's an impressive piece. I would say 1,000, give or take 200 either way, 8 to 12 in that general price range.
What company made that?
We don't know. There's been some dispute about it. Some people think that what is the Lampen, Phoenix or Pittsburgh Lampen Candle Manufacturing Company or something made it. I don't think it was one of your standard. That leads me to comment, neither do we know who made the Gone with the Wind lamps. And I should have commented that when we're talking about the rarest thing in red, you would almost have to come up with the Gone with the Wind lamps. They come in Regal Iris, and there's only about one in each of the pattern, maybe two in some of the pattern. Regal Iris, Sunken Hollyhock, and Roses and Ruffles. And years ago, the Regal Iris brought 9,300 at auction, and the Sunken Hollyhock brought 10,000. Jim Mogg in Missouri still has the Regal Iris and the Morning Glory, and the Sunken Hollyhock. Absolutely stunning pieces. A second Sunken Hollyhock has been found within the last 2 or 3 months. Rick Kogis in Wisconsin went to a yard sale, and there was one in a box that he bought for $150. The bottom did have a little crack in it, but for $150, who cares, huh? So there are the two, and there are parts too. In fact, in one of the last publications, I noticed where 2 different people had bottoms looking for tops. They had the red bottom part of the Gone with the Wind. Yes, Val?
That has been reproduced in
No. There is a reproduced red. Oh, I'm sorry. It has been reproduced in the Gone with the Wind,
Yeah.
but not in any of the standard pattern. It is a poppy.
copy.
It's a poppy, yes. Quite a handsome lamp.
The Charliers have one of those sitting around someplace after them?
Yes.
Huh?
Did I have one sitting around?
No, Charlie Williams.
I expect. I have had a number of them and still have one. I've sold off the other.
Will you have one yourself?
Yes. It was made by LeVay. Beautiful, they are. The Fenton Company came out with a purple one in the Poppy Gone with the Wind lamp early on, and they were a production line item. He sold them as long as they would sell. Then LeVay had a few of the red ones made, so they are limited. But that is not a pattern that was made in the old Carnival Gone with the Wind lamps.
What did you call that pattern?
Poppy. It's a poppy. Okay, where are we here? We talked about this, didn't we? I told you about that at auction. That reminds me to tell you a little story. We haven't had one for several pieces here. There was this little guy that he was born to this carnival collecting company, couple, I should say. And they went to all the auctions. They'd bring home pieces, show them to him as he got older. Never said a word, this little guy. And they'd show him the pieces, and he thought they were nice. He obviously liked them. And one day when he was about 7 years old, they brought home a piece from an auction. And he said, that is the lousiest piece of glass I ever saw. And they said, oh, my son, our precious baby, why haven't you talked before now? He said, up until now, you've been buying pretty damn good glass. This is what we call reverse amberina. You'll see it's darker in the center, and the red isn't on the outside as you would expect. There's a little hint of red in the feet, and if you'll notice, the little points are red, where the heat is affected them. Now, how in the world this is made, I do not know. How you would normally think that this is where it would turn red, you see, on the outer edge, rather than down here. And Gail came up from a flea market with a lovely reverse amberina hat shape in the holly pattern, which is cool.
You want to see it?
Sure, let's let them see what it looks like.
Don, how many
Pattern
are
is
there
it?
of those?
Probably 3 or 4, Don, that I know of.
That's one of my favorite pieces in your house.
Is it
The
really?
most unique, I think, in your house.
See, Connie, she'd sell it. She'll sell anything, you know. We always say she's afraid to let me go away to an auction for fear of what I will buy. I'm afraid to leave her home for fear of what she'll sell. This is Gail's little piece. See how red it is on the body?
Well, you really want to do that.
So reverse amberina. She paid a huge sum for it. You'll have to tell me.
$40
Oh,
at an antique show.
The last one of
That's
these, one
amazing.
did come up at an auction fairly recently, and it either brought $750 or $800. So quite a rare piece. Yes, Bob.
Wasn't that piece, I looked at it earlier, it had an opalescent edge on it?
This one?
Yeah.
No, it has a little red dots, but no opal on it.
Oh, the other piece.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
You could almost say that it does. It's damn faint, but some people would say there is a little opal on the edge.
You can say it's yours.
And they call some things with even any hint of it now opal, and I wouldn't be surprised if you would be justified in calling that reverse amberina
I won't hesitate.
opal. You won't be shy on that. Plume panels vase. There's been a number of these turn up. George Thomas has a pair of them. The last one he bought was at an auction. I think he paid either $600 or $650 for it. But they do come along from time to time. They're not as rare as some of the other red pieces here.
What did you say the pattern was?
Plume panels. This is a piece that most people like. It's a red plaid. And this piece comes both ruffled and ice cream bowl shape. Nearly all of these have been found on the West Coast, up in Oregon particularly. I've never heard of one turning up in the Midwest or back east. So apparently they were one batch or 2 batches or whatever, and all shipped to some distributor in the Northwest or something like that. You see, a lot of our very rare colors have turned up in Australia, England, and so on. And the way that happens is the fact that there was a fellow over there by the name of J.P. Pratt. He lived in England, and he had all of the distributorship for Australia and England. Frank Fenton has told me that his records show that he would come to the Fenton plant and say, make me a gross of this pattern that you have the mold for, but I want it in a color that you haven't made before. So that apparently is what happened, and all of those were export items. They have now, many of them, of course, come back to the United States at horrible prices, but some of the very, very rare colors have turned up over there. They have avid Carnival clubs in Australia and England too, you know, largely for American glass, even though there was, of course, a line of Australian glass made and, of course, a line of English glass made. Generally speaking, less desirable than our American product. But, value? Boy, those prices have really soared. I would say somewhere in the 2000 range, 18 to 2000. in that range. A very, very rare and much sought after piece.
I know, I'd love to get it.
Yeah, they're hard to come by. That piece also comes in a piece that maybe some of you have seen that I've brought down, or you've come to our home and saw it, in Celeste Blue. It is absolutely a fantastic piece. And that's one of 3 that I have heard of. And it came back from England. So again, rare color that was shipped overseas. Fenton's Flowers, or Orange Tree, if you would prefer. Mrs. Hartung called it Fenton's Flowers. One of the pieces that is never a particularly good red. It's rare, but a little bit on the Amberina side.
One of the better ones.
And this is better than some. We bought this from Mrs. Hartung. Remember years ago? Oh golly, I paid her a big price then. I think I paid her $500, wasn't it, Connie? Something like that. I suppose a little more than that. Not a great amount. $750 maybe. But hard to come by. This piece falls much in the same category. It's Fenton's vintage pattern in what we refer to as a 3-footed nut bowl. We have done that to distinguish it from a true fernery. A true fernery's side will come straight up. And a lot of people were confused when they'd see Grape Fernery advertised, and it would turn out to be this rather than Grapin's Cable's true fernery with the straight sides. This was really a fernery. It came with a metal liner and is pictured in the old Butler catalog that way. So it was designed for ferns, and we often will refer to it as a ferner rather than a ferner. I'm sure this nomenclature gets kind of complicated for some of you newer collectors and people attending for the first time, but don't get discouraged. It'll all fall into place. And I have always gone to great length, and I'm sure bored some of you older timers, by mentioning some of these things that those of us that have been around for quite some time sort of take for granted. Because I know my first meeting or two, God, I didn't know what they were even talking about on some of those things. And we always are hesitant to show our ignorance by asking. But there are no dumb questions when it comes to a meeting like this in Carnival. We're all here to help. That isn't the way with a lot of the other collectibles. The R.S. Prussia people won't give each other the time of day. The Carnival people will. They are willing to share their information and go to great lengths to help. So any questions at any time to anyone that has more knowledge than you is always welcome. So don't ever hesitate to ask.
Was the Rose Bowl, okay, this is a time for a dumb question.
All
Was
right.
it ever made in reproduced in a new?
Yes.
It was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because I bought one from you.
Yes.
Not for very much money.
Yes,
No.
and is quite handsome and a better red than the old.
Yeah.
They are signed, of course. Your new Fenton production will always be signed Fenton, written out in script with a circle. So you always will never have any trouble with your new Fenton.
Have a new piece in chocolate glass.
It was made in chocolate, yes, exactly. And it is handsome. Okay, coin dot. This comes very, very good red on the coin dot. Comes 2 different ways. It will come in the ice cream bowl shape or the flattened out ruffle shape. This shape to me is much to be preferred. Your ice cream bowl shape is very deep, and you have a little bit of trouble seeing the pattern, and not quite as appealing as the flattened out one. These sell so seldom. I would throw it into the 800 to 900 category.
John, value
What size
you
is
get
that?
Red Bull or Ferner.
This one here,
Yeah.
6 to 7. Very rare. We seldom see it. Not the prettiest piece in red vine. This is one of the more common pieces that we will see. A little lacy edge basket. These are still selling in the $2 to $250, $275 range. Quite available. Bring a little more in the Jack in the Pulpit shape than some of the others, perhaps. Here we have my favorite of all our red pieces, is a chrysanthemum bowl, and it is a brilliant, handsome red. Can you folks see that? Beautiful, beautiful red. I think it's probably one of the prettiest red pieces in our collection. These, golly, seldom sell. I would, don't even recall when selling, I would probably price it in the 15 to 1750 range at least. And I may be modest on that even.
You are.
Yeah, Connie, we've done a little more. What would you want for it, Connie?
What would I want for it? 18.
18, well, I said that, oh, $50 more.
I thought you said 14 to 15.
No, no, no.
I didn't hear you.
I said 15 to 1750.
Okay, okay, well, I'm going up on it.
Oh, okay. See what I told you. Holly, one of the more common Fenton pieces in red. They're always appealing and very attractive. This again is the ice cream bowl shape. It comes ruffled. The ice cream bowl shape will bring a little bit more. These are now selling in the 7 to 750, even maybe 800, a good one range. So a little less than some of the others. Peacock and Grape, which is one of Fenton's standard old patterns that you'll see a lot of. Always has the bearded berry on the back. And this will come with the spatula feet, also in red. Come in both collar base, as we call this, or the spatula feet. Spatula feet is a little more rare. I think I have always preferred the collar base because they're easier to display. We hang a lot of our pieces on a wall, on walls throughout our condominium unit, and they set up against the wall a little bit better than your spatula feet, even though the spatula feet are more rare. I would suppose these would now bring in the $600 to $700 range.
John,
Yes.
if you want me to say, hasn't people pretty much come to the conclusion that glass hanging on the wall is probably safer in the earthquakes for new collectors than the...
Yeah, I don't have anything to prove that, Don, but I would certainly guess so if you haven't permanently affixed your cabinets to the wall. It definitely would be. All of the serious damage in the Sylmar earthquake and in the one we had in Morgan Hill up in Northern California came from cabinets tipping over, and then everything was damaged. So you should definitely attach, and it doesn't take much, to attach your cabinets to the wall. And on hooks, they would ride out, I think, Don, a little better shape than
the
than
fallings
show.
in the Selmar earthquake, there's stuff on the wall survived.
Yes, I was thinking that it did. Now, what we're talking about is you merely, this collar base, and this collar base wasn't put there for just simply decoration. It was put there for a practical purpose in manufacturing the piece, for that clamp, as I told you, to go on, so they could handle it in the factory. What we do is take a piece of wire, and you can use almost anything. I buy an electrical wire at the hardware store, and put it around there, and twist it. Make a little loop here. Simply hook it on a paper, on a picture hook. Some of my super rare pieces, I've taken a little piece of what we call earthquake stickum, and also stuck them to the wall so it can't jump off the hook. So you can use that added precaution if you like.
What is earthquake stickum?
Well,
Double-sided.
it really is something that we used to order in Northern California from a fellow in Santa Rosa, and he made a big deal of advertising earthquake stickum, and he disappeared. The last order many years ago that I sent him was returned, address unknown. So what it really, I think, was, and I'm kind of guessing, some of us have talked about it, it came in flat strips, looked like licorice, and he had worked supposedly at one of the auto manufacturing plants. And this was a substance used to seal around the back windows, for example, and the windshield and so on. And that he had capitalized on the idea by packaging them up and selling them as earthquake stickum. And it did a heck of a fine job. Now, we're not able to get that anymore, but since then, the stores have come out with very, very good products in different colors. This was always black, which made it hard to use because on a white piece it looked terrible if you're trying to stick it. What do they call some of that, Connie, at the store?
There's a new florist, but it isn't like a florist clay, it's something that's new in a white strip. What was that one you
It's not
said?
floral clay, though.
No, it's not clay.
No, it
It's
isn't.
real sticky,
Yeah.
gummy, sticky
We
tape.
have found,
Sticky on both sides.
yes, again, both sides. We found, Dean, that the floral clay doesn't hold quite as firmly as
It also
I would like.
deteriorates.
What does it do, Stain?
It deteriorates.
It does deteriorate too, over a long period of time. What am I doing here for time? I'm taking too much time. This is a rare little vase called absentee butterfly and berry. The butterfly and berry vase is identical to this, but it has the butterfly and the berry stretched out, you know. And this is the same vase exactly. But like we've referred to the absentee dragon plate, you know, I have chosen to call this absentee butterfly berry, through lack of anything better to call
I
it.
don't know.
Value on that?
Value-wise, oh golly, it would be a shot in the dark. I would suppose $4.50. This is merely another orange tree mug, but I brought it to distinguish it from the one down there, which is very amberina all the way. This one is a good solid red. They left it in the oven a little bit longer than they did those down there. These we talked about with the gold leaf decoration around the bottom. I don't know that they're any more desirable than the pair without them. In fact, I think we both kind of prefer the plain rather than that. But they're in any case a handsome and a rare piece. Here is one of the toughest little devils to find in one of the most common little patterns. It's your little peacock tail. And you'll see them all over the place in hat shapes and little bowls in other colors. But I waited for years and years to ever find a red one. And I've only heard of about 3 red ones that are known. I paid several years ago $5.50 for this. I would expect at least $7.50 or $800 maybe on today's market, because it's a very good and rare, hard to find little piece. We're approaching the end here. This is a 10-inch vintage bowl. Now we've seen a couple others down here in the standard 9-inch, one ruffled and one with the ribbon candy edge. This one is a good red. I don't care for the iridescence grenade. One of these sold, same thing exactly, ice cream bowl shape, a prettier bowl, a better iridescent bowl, no better red, and it brought $3,600 at the, what auction was that? Heart of America? Heart of America in April this year. I went home and anchored this one a little. So a rare piece.
But wasn't that a little overpriced?
I think so.
Normally, I don't
It wouldn't bring that, and I think that's a faulty price to put on it.
Yeah, that's what
I would think I would drop it way down, personally. I would drop it down to in the maybe $1,500 to $1,700 range.
More realistic.
Yeah, far more realistic. 2 people had their neck bowed, and that often happens in auctions. I heard about a vase that sold in that same auction, Helen, where 2 crazy people went a little crazy on it.
Do you
You didn't
see
hear anything
whatever?
about that, did you?
Do you see him
Is
every
that
day in the
one of a
mirror?
kind?
Floyd Whitley. Why I would ever tangle with Floyd Whitley, a Texas oil man, beats the hell out of me. But you get started at these auctions, you know, and Connie kept kicking me. I thought she was kicking me to keep bidding. She told me later she's kicking me to stop. So you never know.
Is that the
about this.
wisteria? No, you,
Yeah.
oh, no, in your book about the wisteria.
Yeah. And it brought what's the heck's the name of it? Hobstar, honeycomb and hobstar vase. It brought $6,500.
Who has it? You or the owner?
A few more payments and I'll have it. This is one of the few pieces of Imperial. This is a luster rose in the orange bowl, the big orange bowl. Has a little bit of amberina, but a handsome piece. We bought this many years ago from Ed Gaida, who some of you will see his name constantly in Mrs. Hartum's books, because she used a lot of his pieces for her drawings in her 10 pattern books. We paid $600 back 15 years or so ago, which was a horrible price. I suppose on today's market, at least 25, if not 3,000. Very few of them are around. Handsome kids. Don Clark walked in a shop a while back and bought a chrysanthemum bowl. And the lady, when making out the ticket, she said Carnival bowl, rose pattern. And Don said that isn't a rose, that's a chrysanthemum. So she erased that and she said, how do you spell chrysanthemum? Don picked up the bowl and said, by God, that is a rose.
True story.
I don't know how our time is. I've talked longer than I intended to, as I usually do. I've told you the story about doing programs for women's clubs. I was always very popular years ago. I'm not up to doing them now. But I was always very popular because they were cheap. I didn't charge anything to do these programs. And there were always women there that could care less about Carnival going on. And I always tried to convert someone in the front row, you know, like you. And after I'd talked too long and drug it out too long, I said, well, have I changed your thinking about Carnival? She said, no, I still like it. So with that, I better quit. Thank you for having me down.